All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I'm Michelle, and with me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And for a second, I almost said I am Diana, and with me is Michelle. So that should give you an idea of where I am this evening. But we have author Stina Leicht with us. We're going to be talking about Loki's Ring, which, of course, was our book of the month. But if I'm not mistaken, you are either in your pub week or it was last week. Am
Oh
I
no, that was
right?
this week. This week. Actually, Tuesday was the big day.
That's what I thought.
Congratulations.
I sat down earlier this evening and I was like, oh, her pub week. I'm pretty sure it was this week.
Yep. Yep.
So how are you? How is pub week going for you?
It's going really well and I'm very happy. I got a hold of a copy of the audiobook even, and it is marvelous.
Mm.
They did an excellent job. So I'm thrilled.
So do you always, I know Diana and I have had this discussion with authors before about listening to your book on audiobook or not listening to your book on audiobook. Do you regularly listen to your books when they come out on audiobooks?
I try to do it because I like to see if I just like to see what it's like. Audiobooks are important to me because I'm dyslexic, and if I'm reading something that's really intensively nonfiction, I get the audiobook specifically because that's pretty much how I'm going to get through the material. I'm not going to be able to do it otherwise. My attention wanders off. So I'm pretty dependent on audiobooks, and I know that a lot of people are, and
Mhm.
I just like to check it just to see. And this time I was just blown away. So they did such a great job on it.
I love that. And is it okay if we talk about the dyslexia? Because I really want to say, like, a huge kudos to you, because whenever people discuss dyslexia, it's like on TV and the media, it's usually in a negative light. And here you are, an author who has dyslexia, who's written a book. Congratulations to you. I think that's wonderful. And I think it's an excellent showing that, hey, you can still do these things. It's not this limitation that people can have.
Yeah, yeah. I for me, I'm dyslexic and I also have ADHD, so it's kind of like a combination of the two things. I need to um, clarify. I mean, because those two overlap. For me, I have to concentrate a lot harder on the page. And basically, what I do is, while I'm reading, I've learned to just fill in the letters for myself. So I can actually read the word with the first part of the word and the last part of the word. The middle
Okay.
part I don't get so much, which is why my spelling is not the best.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that going on. There are people that I know that have dyslexia much worse than I do. But yeah, at an early age, the letters were just vanishing off the page and nobody could tell me what was going on. I'm of an age where when I was very small, they didn't know what it was. So they just gave me bifocals and told me to soldier on. So I did.
So, and I know Loki's Ring. So, of course, we're obviously going to be talking about Loki's Ring tonight, but I also um, picked up a Persephone Station when I found it completely by coincidence. I was at one of my favorite bookstores and I saw it and I thought, oh, this looks really cool. So of course I bought it. And it wasn't until I got home that I was like, oh, hey, this is our author of the month. So now they're quite happy on the shelf next to each other. But I had noticed prior to Persephone Station and Loki's Ring, your writing leaned more kind of in the fantasy realm of sci-fi fantasy. with the duology that you wrote, and a couple other, the titles have completely flown out of my mind.
Blood and Honey.
But
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
Yes.
What drew you into the sci-fi realm of sci-fi fantasy and made you want to explore that in these two books?
Well, the Malorum Gates was supposed to be a trilogy, and the second book didn't do very well. And so my publisher came to me and said, well, we're not going to buy a third one, but how about writing something science fiction? And I was like, okay. I've always wanted to write science fiction, frankly. I love science fiction. I've always loved it. Since I was a little kid. I actually wanted to be an astronaut at one point. It's insane. But yeah, I just was very overwhelmed with the idea of doing it at first. So, because I don't have a background in science, my background's in art. I just thought it would be too hard, and the genre has not got a great reputation as far as being welcoming of female writers or anyone who's not white male, really. So yeah, but I've always loved science fiction. I've always loved science fiction movies. I'm a big Trekkie. I like Star Wars. So that's what I did.
So you're already in that world before. You're familiar with it. It was just the notion of actually building your own world within that world.
Yeah.
So when I had to run down real quick because we've had a package, of course, show up in the middle of the podcast. Have we talked about the found family yet? Okay.
No, we were just talking about moving into science fiction versus fantasy. So we haven't discussed that yet. But that's one theme that I definitely found. It's always a favorite theme of mine, but I feel like it definitely came through and shown through in Loki's Ring is that storyline of found or made family, or chosen family versus blood family, or biological family, especially in how devoted Gita is to her crew and to her daughters, who not everyone would consider them her daughters, but she does. And I just that's one of the themes that we love talking about on the show, is that theme of found family. What did it mean to you to explore that and weave that into Gita's world and the people that she chooses to keep in it?
I really like found family stories. For me, friends are really important, and close friends are in fact the family you get to pick, you get to choose. And that's just such an important bond, to have the support of another person in your life who can understand things, that understand how you live your life and how you want to live your life, and encourage you, and like trying to bring out the best in one another, and just having a whole group of people that you just know and understand and love, and you can fight with, but at the same time, that they're still there. Not all. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to break up this particular found family and then work on bringing them back together again, is I wanted to, because most people would say that with a found family, it's just easier for them to ditch you. And I don't think that has to be the case, Intimate relationships can be friendships, and they can be really powerful. It's just how much commitment you have to it, right? And how much you decide to have a commitment to one another. So you can have a friend who you've been friends with since second grade, and things are still great, or not. So yeah, I like, a lot of times in stories, people just have relationships that are just there and nothing changes. But you can't do that in a long-term relationship, right? Long-term relationships, people change over time. That's just how that is. And the relationship itself has to cope with that and move along with that, and making mistakes and being okay with that eventually, and forgiving one another, and all of that stuff. That's all hard work in a relationship. And I wanted to demonstrate that you could do that with a found family, you know. So I like found families.
Well, I think what you just mentioned about, fighting and forgiving and coming back to each other, the scene that immediately came to mind when you said that was our first introduction to Carter, when we meet Carter for the first time, and that phone conversation between Gita and Carter is just having, like, in their mind, they're like, apologize, say you're sorry, but the words just don't come out. And that's in those relationships that if you have that kind of relationship with someone, say apologizing could be the hardest thing, because you don't know how to get that out and move on. So I think that was a really short phone call. It was a really simple scene, but I think that demonstrated a lot of that complex relationship.
Thanks. Yeah, I like flawed characters. I don't want them to be perfect, because nobody is perfect. But at the same time, it's like one of have you ever watched Ted Lasso? Right?
Yes.
My favorite thing about Ted Lasso is everyone in that show, everyone has messed up. They've done something really stupid, or they're going to do something really stupid, but they try, and they still try to be good friends to one another, no matter what. That's the whole thing. They make the choice to be a friend and do something every single time. And I just adore that. I want to see more. I want to see more of that on the screen, and not have it always be white men.
And I love that. That's one things about representation and the beauty of Ted Lasso, because I've found that to be a comfort show in a lot of ways, where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna go back and I'm gonna rewatch the episodes, because you get this feel good sense about it, and they're not all white males, and they're all just doing the best they can with what they have, and it puts things like relationships and mental health at center stage in a more pleasant way than some of the drama depictions that we see on television.
Yeah, and the thing is one of the things, my favorite thing, I hate to talk about something that's completely different than our topic, but one of my favorite things about it is it's set in a culture of toxic masculinity. I mean, it's mainly a culture known for that, right? Sports, and British sports even more so. You have your stiff upper lip. You don't say all these things. You don't have the breakdowns. You don't do all those sorts of. It's just beautiful the way it's all done, and it totally flipped my expectations, because it's a found family, and they're always there for one another, and it's feminist on top of it, right?
Yeah. And I feel like this is one of the reasons why what we watch as authors can be so very important, because it does have a tendency to bleed out into the page, into what we wrote and what we write. And so having that representation, like Ted Lasso, can also affect Loki's ring as well.
Yeah.
Correct? See, we bring it all around. We go off on our tangents, but
It's a valid conversation topic.
Well, I feel like positivity is what we really need right now.
Mhm.
We have spent
Mhm.
so much time with like everything being grim and horrible and blah blah blah. And I just feel like we need positivity. You can't see, if you can't have hope, there's no point in even trying, right? Because you don't have the energy to do the thing that you need to do. And there's so much work to do right now. With climate change and the politics the way they are and like everything else, it's just so important. We need to have the hope that we can do this. And I think if we do, we can apply ourselves enough, and humanity is a pretty creative bunch. We can do some pretty amazing things. I just wish we didn't have to back ourselves up into a corner to do it.
Our love of the underdog is really getting us.
Man.
And I have to say, though, that's one of the things I love about science fiction. True science fiction is that there's hope. There's hope in it. That's what I think the true hallmark of a science fiction novel or movie, TV show, what have you, is that there's hope. That's what differentiates it from dystopia. Dystopia is the world is falling apart. It's the Hunger Games. It's dystopian, whereas with science fiction, there's a hope for a better future.
Yeah, dystopian is more like, I mean,
The world fell apart. How do we live in it?
Yeah, there's apocalyptic and apocalypses, or where everything is just completely falling apart and that's the end, right? And the dystopia is more like the authoritarian, everything is controlled and everything is bad, and you know, did you ever see the movie Brazil? Brazil is a dystopia. Yeah, it's it does not end. The end is not positive. There's no hope. That's just it. Yeah. But I mean, positivity is certainly my favorite part of science fiction, right? Tomorrowland, did you ever see that movie?
Yes, love that.
Oh
movie.
yeah.
It's so underrated in my opinion. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. That whole thing about feeding the right wolf. Are we feeding the right wolf? I thought that was so important, and I felt like it just, nobody listened. But yeah, but I agree with you. It's my favorite kind of science fiction. It's science fiction that has a hopeful future to it. And you can have like dark things happen, and you can have all of these adventures, right? I mean, I think what's central to even in fantasy, I think what's central to the Lord of the Rings, as dark as it is, it's hope that someday this is all going to work out, right? So yeah, I agree with you.
Now, since obviously we're definitely talking about science fiction. Oh my God, my brain just shut down for a minute. We have to talk for a second about world building and how you approach that, because you literally created interstellar worlds and just so much for Loki's ring. You had a lot to build. How do you approach creating that? Do you spend a lot of time fleshing out the world and components and how the structures are before you really get into the drafting, or do you evolve the world and the story as you go?
I kind of do a little bit of both. What I usually do I mean, it's the same, it's the same universe in Persephone Station. It's just that Persephone Station is earlier in the history of the world, of the universe, right? So I just kind of decided, okay, we're going to have big picture. Here's my utopia, right? Here's my Star Trek world, kind of, right? And then over here we'll have a group of people that really just didn't want to be part of that, and just carry it on from there, because there's always people who don't want to live in, because they feel, I don't know, one of the things, I'm sorry, I hope this isn't gonna, I don't like libertarianism at all. I think it's the most awful political position ever, because it's the vampire of political philosophies, frankly, because all they do is they park themselves in, they don't build anything, they can't. Highly recommend a book, the title is fabulous. A Libertarian Walks into a Bear is the title of the book. It's a nonfiction, and it's basically about this group of people that decided that they would create a libertarian community. And basically what happened was they sucked all of the resources from other neighborhoods around them, the city around, on the other towns around them, because they didn't support their own fire station. They didn't want to put money into the actual community. So they just ended up sucking off of everybody else around them. They didn't contribute anything, they just consumed. So their little free town or whatever ended up being a garbage dump that burned down, that had far too many bears, because some woman decided she wanted to feed bears, and bears are dangerous creatures. So people got hurt, and they couldn't do anything about anything because they didn't want to support any kind of a governmental system. So it just ended up being an expense to the other people around them. And it's very selfish. Also, if you're out in space and you have a libertarian perspective, don't expect to live very long.
True.
You need one another.
And I think it goes towards the idea that all art is political. We see it a lot with book bannings and whatnot. But the true sense of every art is political, whether it's the author's influence on it, the history's influence on it. There's going to be some sort of idea about it, and the artist is always going to have their political side, because let's face it, we're human and we're going to have our opinions reflected within the work.
Yep. That's just how it is. So, yeah, and the whole thing about the rugged individual making the West is bullshit. Because if you actually read the history, they're helping one another out. They're building cabins for each other. They're having barn raisings for one another, and somebody's starving, they feed one another. I mean, that's what happens when you're in a place with not a whole lot of civilization. So anyway, I wanted to emphasize that, because there's nothing out there in space but what you take with you. And it's, you're definitely in a situation where you need to have people looking out for one another. And that's why I picked, I really liked Apollo 13. I really liked that whole thing where we have exactly 45 minutes to come up with something that will take care of this problem with the air filter, with pens and paper clips and a t-shirt and maybe an old sock, and we've got to do this with that. 45 minutes to do it in, or we're all gonna die. I mean, I just kind of liked that. And we never see women do those kinds of things, or non-binary people. No, it's just, we just never see that. We never see it on screen, and we never see it in books. So I feel like it's really important that we do see that. We need people other than white men being competent on the screen or in our entertainment, in our books. It's extremely important. The other day, last night, someone said something. This one young woman was talking about how she was at a convention, and she has a freelance business, and she was going around talking to different gaming companies about how she had services that she wanted to perform for their companies, right? And she ended up being sexually harassed because,
Oh my God.
yeah, this one guy was like, okay, we're going to move the meeting until this time. And then he moved the meeting again or something. And then he calls her, he texts her later and is like, okay, so I am available at this and such time. And she's like, okay, cool. And bring your partner. And I hope you don't mind if I bring my partner that I work with. And so we could all talk about this project. And he was all like, wait, I was texting you for a date. And she was just like, okay, no, and I don't want to work with your company anymore, which was wise of her. But in all the stories, it's always women, white women specifically, who, if they're on the screen, they're dating, they fall in love with the person they're working with. It's just there. They're not there being competent and doing a good job and being a part of a team. It's always, there's one white woman and then a whole bunch of white men, and so it's got the one white woman, so it must be perfectly fine. I mean, that's the ratio, right? And it's like, no, that's not the ratio. So I just feel like it's really important to demonstrate that space is for everyone, that everyone should have a chance to be the hero, and that things don't change because of one person. We're all taught that whole great man myth, and that's garbage. The way change happens is groups of people make things happen. It takes a team. So that's the other reason why I write so much about found families, because it's the team that makes things happen. I feel like I'm all over
Our specialty on the show is tangents. So
okay, well then I'll fit right.
We are writing. We do tangents on a weekly basis. And when you mentioned earlier that when you were little you wanted to be an astronaut for when you grew up, and I just thought, I've always said, it takes such strength and fearlessness and curiosity to be able to say something like that, because I would not want to be an astronaut. I do not have that fearlessness and that curiosity. So I admire the people who have an interest in it, and the people who become, the astronauts to explore. And I mean, even, back in, or space exploration was a thing, the people to explore beyond what they knew is a certain level of bravery and curiosity. I think it's a perfect combination of the two.
Have you ever been to the Houston Space Center, the Johnson Space Center?
The Houston one, oh, you have. I just went earlier this year. I went to Cape Canaveral here in Florida.
Well, the Houston, the Johnson Center in Houston, Johnson Space Center, you go into the command room and it just floors me. I mean, what they were using to send people into space, it was just the most simplistic gear I've ever seen. I Right? It's like
bitty rockets. Like you can't move around. It's like
rotary
claustrophobia.
phones, pencils and slide rules. Computer screens that just show text.
What's that?
Yeah, it's just amazing to me. That just completely blows me away every time I think about it. It's like you just put a person up in space in a tin can and then bring them back down. So I mean, I just that I think is really fascinating. I read a lot about it because again, I really like the Apollo 13 thing. And do you know why they were able to do that?
No.
They run simulations over and over and over again. So it was, instead of like a computer simulation, they had like a whole bunch of binders, and the person in charge would walk over, they'd pluck a binder off the shelf and say, okay, we're running simulation number 27. All right, you are not here today because you've had a heart attack. Goodbye. You will take over his station. Now, you over here do this, and this is what we have to do. We have to solve it in 1 hour. And they go through step by step and resolve various problems over and over and over and over again. That's what they do. And so when problems happen, they are able to think creatively and on the spot do perform that way without panicking because they're constantly doing it. I thought that was fascinating.
And really, that's what authors do when we're trying to figure out plot points or plot holes. Trying to go, okay, what would happen if
You see, Michelle, you can be an astronaut.
Oh yeah. We actually had someone from NASA when I went to ArmadilloCon last year. He ran a panel. What's it called? Space is Trying to Kill You. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, and he ran scenarios for us.
that's cool.
He ran simulations for us and just said, okay, what do you do? And it was a hoot. I had a blast. It was so much fun. And yeah.
Was this for authors? Was this an author event, or was this for? I've never heard of ArmadilloCon. I feel.
Oh
like
no, ArmadilloCon. It's a science fiction convention, and authors come and talk, and they have people with different backgrounds come. And because we're in Austin, so we're close to Houston, and they can get people from NASA to come up and talk.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. I really love it.
Hence the name Armadillo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, when I lived in Texas, I think the funniest thing that we joked around about was, because armadillos are everywhere, except my dad went there once, and he was at he went to a diner, and he mentioned something of asking about armadillos. Like, well, it was like his first time there, and he was like, well, I see an armadillo. And the woman's like, oh no, don't worry about it, they're extinct. and knowing this story, every time my husband and I came across a dead armadillo on the side of the road, because they're always on the side of the road, we can see them, at least where we were, we're like, oh, that's why they're extinct.
Here's another
because they're
you only ever see them dead.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not true. Because
I know they're very alive and well.
Yeah.
Because
digging
that's why you
holes
see them
in your lawn.
We had. I've known that we have armadillos out here, but I'd never seen one until a few weeks ago. And this little armadillo, he was just happy as can be, just like snuffling around in the grass by my patio, just completely oblivious to the tiny little dog that was separated by a glass door that was like ready to rip him to shreds because she thinks she's tough.
Oh no.
But he was just so cute. Like, I know they dig holes in your yard, but they're very,
yeah.
very cute.
Yeah, they got big old claws.
But we kind of touched on this a little bit tangentially. Is the research? What kind of research did you do as far as the technology that you include in Loki's ring? I mean, there is a lot, and I just reading through it, you made it sound like it was so easy for you to string together. To build the ships and the pods and the everything. What was the research behind it that you did?
Well, I started initially with AI because it was like I said, my background is actually psychology and art. Psychology was my first attempt at a major. But I ended up with a degree in animation. So I thought I was kind of overwhelmed with the amount of science that I was going to have to cram into my head to make science fiction work when I started with Persephone Station. So I selected AI because it was related to psychology. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's going to be easy for me to pick up. So I read a lot of, because audiobooks are really easy to read, right? So sometimes if it's particularly dense, I will buy a hard copy and then also the audiobook, and then run through the audiobook. And if I come across something that I really want to make note of, I'll look it up in the hard copy and like highlight in my nonfiction books are for me to mark up and scribble in. That's what they're for, because that's what I learned at university. Right. So so I started off with AI, and then I kind of did the Terry Pratchett thing, right? If anything looked interesting, I would look into it and read about it and then remember it. And so some of it, like the whole thing with they're eating it, and someone says, okay, the doctor is all like, okay, I'll take a cup of mint tea or whatever. Wow, this doesn't taste right, right? Mm. That whole thing I picked up from NPR. I listened to a lot of podcasts on science and that kind of thing, but on NPR, they had a story about how the banana has changed so much. Like the original flavor of a banana, you've had banana flavored gum, right? Mm-hmm. Right? How cloying and sweet it is. Mm-hmm. That's actually closer to the original flavor of a real banana. Early days. Over time, we have bred it to be more like it is now. Yeah, there was like a time period in the 20s, I think it was, where people were like, oh, but this new fruit, it's really cool. And bananas were really popular. And so when you look at comedy routines from like the 20s or whatever, there's always somebody slipping on a banana peel. It's because people were eating a lot of bananas and just tossing the banana peel on the ground. But yeah, over time, the banana has changed, and lots of foods have done that. Like carrots were originally purple. Mm-hmm. Go figure.
Really?
Yeah. Look it up. It's pretty wild. Know that. So, and then I was thinking to myself, now, wouldn't that be interesting if you have a food replicator? It knows to replicate the food this one way every time. But if you have a new ship over here and there are new formulations, then their foods will taste slightly different because the food profile changes, right? So I just thought I thought it would be kind of neat to contrast that with actually growing food in their garden. Mm-hmm. and the food replicator, which had that one thing, and then the plant that's actually evolving. Yeah.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm just like, my mind is kind of blown at the moment over that.
You know,
really
over
cool.
carrots were originally purple. I really did not know that. Now
Yeah.
I have to Google.
Yeah, it's like you can-
Definitely do it. It's
yeah, and that's
really
something
cool.
that you can even do with the kids if you want to, because I know you can buy the heirloom seeds of carrots, tomatoes, corn. I believe peas are another one where you have those heirloom varieties that are different. Some have slightly different textures, different colors. I mean, tomatoes, you kind of see them sometimes in the grocery store where there's like the purple and the red and the yellow and then the cherry red that we see.
Yeah.
But yeah, look up the heirloom vegetables, and it's far different from what we see today.
Yeah. So I mean, there's all that. I looked up. There's a lot of physics and science about ring worlds out there,
Mhm.
so I watched a lot of videos about that. I don't know. I just come across things that fascinate me, and I just go with it. I thought it would be really interesting to come up with a gas station, because here's the thing. When my family went on a lot of road trips, there's certain things that you see on a road trip, right? There's like the reptile farm or the pecan, the wooden bowl making place, you see them every time you take a road trip. And the funny thing was, I went to England and we decided to drive from London to Whitby for the 200th anniversary of Dracula, the writing of Dracula. So we took a road trip, right? We're driving down the highway. What do we see? We see the Stuckies. It's not called a Stuckies. It's a Stuckies. And I was like, holy crap, it's the same wherever you go. There's the same little roadside places that sell the little roadside things.
Of course,
so I thought, wouldn't it do the same thing? You'd still have the gas stations in the middle of nowhere. You'd still have like the reptile farm, right?
Mhm.
That kind of thing would still be there. It's just, that's how humans work, I guess. So yeah, the giant ball of string or whatever. So I thought, well, how would gas stations work or whatever? And turns out black holes send out a lot of energy, and they come in different sizes. And so I looked all of that up and watched several videos about that and dropped that in there. And I gave all of these things female science fiction writer names. So yeah, the Hopkins.
I love that. That was one of my questions,
Yeah.
was how you came up with the names. I love that.
Yeah. So there's and then I also famous, if there was a woman who had anything to do with space program, I would name something for them too. And those were all the names that I pulled for those kinds of things, like the Hopper Johnson drive.
I love it. We all have to do our part to subvert the patriarchy in
yeah.
one way, shape, or form.
Yeah. So it's a Hopper Johnson drive, so it's called a jump drive, right? Hopper. So anyway.
Well, I know Diana has to jet, to use appropriate terminology, fitting. But Stina, thank you so much for making time for us. I know Loki's Ring is now out in the world, so if you would like to order your own copy, everyone, please be sure to check out our show notes. You can click on the link to our bookshop on bookshop.org and order your own copy. As always, bookshop.org supports our wonderful writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all of the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And Stina, thank you so much again. We've had such a blast chatting with you. please enjoy the rest of your pub week.
Thank you.
And what Diana, what do you say? You say hydrate, and what are your rules?
Hydrate and get plenty of rest.
Absolutely.
And enjoy every single minute of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. You
Right.
too.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.